Coming up on Global Business, Chinese President Xi Jinping says China and Spain have developed a comprehensive strategic partnership based on mutual respect, equality, and mutual benefit after meeting Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez in Beijing on Friday. The Boao Forum for Asia wrapped up its first fully in-person event since 2019 in Hainan Province, with participants discussing several key economic issues. And China's economy showed a faster pace of recovery in March, with the non-manufacturing PMI coming in at 58.2, the highest reading in a year. Hello and welcome to Global Business here on CGTN. I'm Guan Xing in Beijing. And first up in the program, Chinese President Xi Jinping met with Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez in Beijing on Friday, noting that this year marked the 50th anniversary of the two countries' diplomatic relations. Xi Jinping said China and Spain have developed a comprehensive strategic partnership based on a commitment to the founding principles of mutual respect, equality, and mutual benefit, and to the correct path of friendly interactions between countries with different cultures and systems. He said China's pursuit of modernization and high-quality development will bring new development opportunities for Spain and other countries around the world. He said China is willing to use this 50th anniversary as a new starting point and deepen bilateral relations. Xi Jinping also said it is important for the two sides to have mutual understanding and mutual support on issues concerning each other's core interests, such as sovereignty, security, development, and dignity. He welcomed more Spanish companies and goods to come into the Chinese market and hoped Spain would treat Chinese companies in a fair, just, transparent, and non-discriminatory way. He said the two sides should work together on the China-Spain Year of Culture and Tourism to promote cultural exchange. And he asked Sanchez to convey cordial greetings to King Philip VI. Sanchez first expressed King Philip VI's greetings to Xi. He said Spain is prepared to strengthen high-level interactions with China and promote exchanges and cooperation in such areas like electric vehicles, green energy, and the digital economy. He said that Spain is willing to promote dialogue and cooperation between Europe and China. The two leaders also exchanged views on the Ukraine conflict. Chinese President Xi Jinping has also met with Malaysia Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim. The two leaders marked the 10th year of their comprehensive strategic partnership, and CGTN's Zhao Yunfei reports.
More progress in bilateral relations. Chinese President Xi Jinping has met with Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim. President Xi says the two countries have reached a consensus on building a community with a shared future, and that will open a new chapter for the China-Malaysia relationship. He said China adheres to the people-centered development philosophy, and that aligns with Malaysia's governance strategy. The Chinese leader added the two countries should strengthen communication between government officials, legislatures, and political parties, as well as promote the high-quality development of the Belt and Road Initiative. He went on to say that both China and Malaysia are contributors to globalization and multilateralism, and that they should work together for the common interest of developing countries. Prime Minister Anwar said he came to China with sincerity, and that Malaysia was willing to strengthen economic and trade cooperation with China and learn from China's poverty reduction experience. He added that China has played a constructive role in promoting world peace, and that ASEAN will play an active role in avoiding the escalation of tension in Southeast Asia. This is Anwar Ibrahim's first visit to China since becoming the Prime Minister last November. Malaysia hopes this visit will take the friendship between the two countries to a new level. China calls on deepening cooperation with Malaysia to help cope with the risks facing Asia and beyond. Malaysia represents an important link in the Belt and Road Initiative. The framework has delivered substantial contributions to trade and investment between two countries. China has been Malaysia's leading trade partner for more than a decade. Meanwhile, China's relationships with ASEAN countries have been reinforced as the world recovers from the COVID pandemic. China says it is working with Southeast Asia partners, including Malaysia, to uphold regional stability and prosperity. Zhao Yunfei, CGTN, Beijing.
Meanwhile, Chinese President Xi Jinping has met with Singaporean Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong in Beijing. And Xi Jinping said China and Singapore have upgraded their partnership during the visit. He said China would share development opportunities with Singapore. Lee Hsien Loong said Singapore looked forward to deepening economic cooperation with China. He said competition must be based on trust and respect. And he has said he hoped to boost connectivity with China. Bilateral trade between China and Spain reached around $52 billion in 2022, marking China Spain's largest trading partner outside the EU. Our reporter Ying Junyi finds out how the trade volume has been growing.
An exquisite plate of jamón ibérica from Spain, along with a dish of fresh oyster from France. For Western cuisine foodies, it's definitely a delightful combination.
Almost all the customers order the ham with oysters. We're all full on Friday and Saturday, 30 or so tables.
Following the easing of COVID precaution policies, things have started recovering at this Italian restaurant in Shanghai's downtown Huangpu district. It's just one of the large buyers of iconic Spanish product in China, as the importers are well aware.
We're now seeing a 30 to 50% growth in imports every year. When we first entered the China market, corporates and restaurants dominated our customer list. But since 2018, there's been an increasing demand from individual buyers. The Spanish government has a legal requirement on the product origin for jamón ibérico. Only if you meet a certain grade can you get the certificate. It's an industry under protection in Spain, and we hope to bring more of it here. With the further development of bilateral trade relations, we want to make more expensive products available to Chinese consumers at a more favorable price.
At this import market in Shanghai, the Spanish ham saw sales jumping 200% last year from 2021.
The bilateral agreement on GI means the well-known products are certificated by the government. So we may prioritize those products when we buy, like Spanish ham, French champagne, as well as wine and fruit vinegar from Europe. This is also a great tool as an introduction for consumers. This year, we are also working to develop Silk Road e-commerce. Through cross-border e-commerce, we want to introduce more popular European products to China quickly.
Spain is China's sixth largest trading partner in the European Union, and China is Spain's largest trading partner outside the EU. Bilateral trade reached around $51.5 billion in 2022, up 6.5% year-on-year. Ying Junyi, ICIS for CGTN, Shanghai.
Singapore's Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong is currently visiting China, and one of the key objectives of his visit is to promote deeper economic cooperation between the two countries. Our reporter Wang Tianyu sat down with the chairman of the Singapore Chamber of Commerce and Industry in China, who says the business exchanges between Singapore and China is set to gather pace.
Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong came to China on Monday, and he's going to stay here for 6 days. So what kind of signals do you think his visit going to send out?
Our Prime Minister spoke at the Boao Forum about an uncertain world, solidarity and cooperation for development amid challenges. I think this set the tone for what his purpose of this trip was. And in this age of political uncertainty between superpowers, China and the United States, our Prime Minister's key message will be that countries large and small need to draw closer together through commonality to broaden and deepen economic relationships so that there can be mutual prosperity. And any issues that have to be resolved should be done through mutual understanding, goodwill, and cooperation. Now, finally, Asia region should also remain free and open so that everyone within can continue to promote economic cooperation and good relationships with China and the world.
China has relaxed its COVID-19 restrictions and further opened up borders. So given that change, what would you and your members anticipate Singaporean companies' investments in China in 2023?
Well, there already exists much trade, commerce and investment between the two countries. Singapore and China have a long history together. Singapore being China's largest FDI country and China being Singapore's largest trading partner for many years already. Yeah, things slowed down a lot during COVID-19 restrictions, But I think now with the relaxation, things are ramping up quite a bit. Yeah. It's like playing catch up for everybody, you know. Everyone trying to do everything in 6 months what we could not do in 3 years. Yeah. But we recently had a focus business survey on how bullish our members are or post COVID-19 about China, and 98% responded positively. Yeah. So I'm sure they will continue to see lots of business activity going both ways between Singapore and China.
And now we're heading for a short break. Still to come on the program. Chinese economy showed a faster pace of recovery from March, with the non-manufacturing PMI standing at 58.2 for March, the highest in a year.
The global economy as we know it sits at a critical juncture. An uncertain world facing unprecedented challenges. In times like these, solidarity, cooperation, and ensuring development are paramount. For over 2 decades, leaders from across the region and around the world have gathered at the Boao Forum for Asia to discuss the most pressing issues of our time and forge partnerships. Join CGTN as we bring you the latest insights, interviews, and analysis from this year's event. Our special coverage begins on March 27th, only on CGTN.
The Boao Forum for Asia annual conference has wrapped up in Hainan province. During the last 4 days, officials, business people, and academics discussed topics such as economy, geopolitics, and security. Issues included extreme weather and climate change, the next generation internet, and development and security. It was the forum's first fully in-person event since 2019. Our Zheng Chunying reports from Boao.
Unity, cooperation, openness, and inclusiveness. They are some of the key words when it comes to the consensus reached at this year's Boao Forum for Asia annual conference. Li Baodong, the Secretary General of the Boao Forum for Asia, spoke highly of the event at the closing ceremony of the conference, saying it had managed to create a platform for international delegates to exchange views, propose tangible suggestions, and forge ties.
We have received much feedback on how the agenda of this year's conference covered almost all critical issues affecting the Asian region and the world, and how it worked to promote international cooperation.
And cooperation is even more crucial for Asia in particular. The official pointed out that as the world is facing such high levels of uncertainty, Asia's development depends on the continent remaining stable, inclusive, and open.
Asia is an important driving force of the global economic recovery and is a region full of vitality and potential. In order to achieve prosperous development in Asian regions, countries must be stable, open, and inclusive, and they should continue to deepen collaboration.
Although the annual conference has come to an end with many achievements, the official said that the Boao Forum for Asia is expected to host more activities and workshops later this year, both in China and abroad, in order to create more platforms for international delegates to explore more opportunities for win-win cooperation. Zheng Chunying, CGTN, Boao in Hainan Province.
And now for more insights on the Boao Forum for Asia, let's bring in Liu Yangshen, Senior Fellow at Taike Institute and founder of Hao Capital. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Liu. So you've been back from Boao Forum this year and it sent a very strong signal of further reform and opening up to the world at the forum. But how well is this message received by the world? I mean, we just heard from European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen that China has turned the page on the era of reform and opening up, and it is now moving into a new era of security and control. What is your take on that?
I think it's purely politics that she's playing. That's one part. In China bashing as usual, she's famous for that in the EU, even though even within the EU there are differences of opinion on whether or not China is continuing opening up. But the other part is assuming if China became powerful like the Western countries, it would do the same thing as the Western countries do, namely using national security as an excuse for China bashing. So I think it's whatever politics she may want to play, China continues on the road of opening up and reform because it has been successful for the last 2 decades, 3 decades.
That's right. So this message is not well received by politicians, but better received by business people, right?
Absolutely. Business people continue to flood in. Look at what happened last week at the meetings in Beijing. Even though the Germans are not saying this, but the German business community, the head of Siemens, head of Mercedes, head of BMW, head of Volkswagen, head of all major companies in Germany attended the conference in Beijing.
That's right. We see Tim Cook having good time in San
That's right.
Yeah. So talking about the economic outlook about the Asia region, the Boao Forum is promoting more regional economic integration to foster future growth. In your opinion, how do you see the complementarities among Asian economies, and what do you see China's role in the supply chains in Asia?
I think instead of looking at it theoretically, in practical terms, one should not call it the rise of China in the last 2 decades, but it's the rise of Asia with the Chinese market at its core. If you look at complementarity, I think it's more important to look at the supply chain. No other country or even country groups has the sufficient basis to create a supply chain for complete industries. Only China. And many of these Southeast Asian countries that have grown rapidly in the last decade grew because of China's growth and participated in becoming part of the supply chain. So it is more than complementarity, but I think it's already becoming an integrated supply chain. Now we have, of course, the ASEAN countries and Chinese economy significantly integrated, and now we're also going to have very soon the Middle East and probably the Central Asian countries coming along as well.
Indeed, and we also heard from IMF chief Kristalina Georgieva in China that 1 percentage point of China's growth will translate into 0.3 percentage points of other Asian nations, which is a very positive signal. And Mr. Liu, I'd like to have your take on China-U.S. Relations, because Asia is aiming for stability, aiming for development. However, how much will the principle of free trade and open trade being impacted by rising tensions between China and the United States?
I would put it differently. I wouldn't call it rising tensions between China and the United States, but I call it the anti-market forces that is being promoted by the United States or led by the United States with some European backers. Because ultimately what we look for in business, I'm a businessman, what we look for in business is profitability. And the biggest contributor to profitability other than technology has been efficiency enhancement. How do you get efficiency enhancement? You have economies of scale. You have sophisticated supply chain. That's what globalization has been. What U.S. is doing in terms of sanctions, in terms of anti-trade measures, in terms of so-called dumping duties, and the trade war launched against China, all of which goes against efficiency enhancement, all of which also goes against the free market principles. But I don't think they will succeed, because the regionalization of economies and the support that China is now receiving from now, aside from the ASEAN countries, but also the Middle East, is going to block whatever attempts of the U.S. to continue to prevent China's rise or Asia's rise.
Indeed, I hope the region can focus on its own development and not be impacted by this wrong approach. Thank you very much for sharing with us, Mr. Liu.
Thank you.
And that was Liu Yangchen, Senior Fellow of Taihe Institute and founder of How Capital for us. The Boao Forum for Asia has also been an effective channel to deepen cooperation in other areas besides economic topics. This year, the forum held a dialogue on religion and diverse cultures. Our reporter Su Xinbo has more.
A SET forum focusing on religious cooperation was held on Friday to facilitate mutual learning from different civilizations. Representatives and experts highlighted the importance of reaching a consensus and reinforcing solidarity amid global uncertainties by expanding cultural and religious exchanges.
China has come up with effective solutions when faced with challenges and cultural barriers. Inclusiveness and coexistence has always been one of the important components of Chinese religious culture.
The SAF Forum has been expanding the topics on religion and working as a channel to create more opportunities.
I hope that in the future there will be more dialogue between China and Latin America in the field of religion. I hope to witness more efforts between the two sides reaching consensus and achieving mutual development.
Since its establishment in 2015, the forum has brought guests from different countries and regions together to deepen exchanges and mutual learning among civilizations. Looking ahead, the forum is set to continue to pool wisdom and strength for building a community with a shared future for mankind. Su Xinbo, CGTN, Beijing.
According to data released this morning, China's economy showed a faster pace of recovery for March. The official manufacturing PMI stood at 51.9, slightly lower than last month, 52.6. But the business level is still the highest in nearly 2 years. With the recovery of the domestic economic cycle picking up speed, manufacturing production and market demand rose steadily. Meanwhile, the non-manufacturing PMI stood at 58.2 for March, up 1.9 percentage points from the previous month, the highest in the year, indicating that the recovery of the non-manufacturing sector accelerated. The services and construction industries also posted growth. This week, finance ministers and central bank governors from the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, met to discuss financial independence and reducing dependence on the U.S. dollar in trade. To better understand this, we're joined by Hong Hao, Chief Economist at Grow Investment Group. Great to see you again, Mr. Hong. So ASEAN is not alone. China and Brazil just agreed to trade in their own currencies. India says it is ready to trade in a rupee with countries that have dollar shortage. Why is there a rising tendency to ditch the U.S. dollar as an intermediary currency in trade?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think since last year, the war between Russia and Ukraine basically raised the alarm bell, among many of the participants in the U.S. dollar system. Basically, Russia has its entire foreign exchange reserve being frozen by the U.S. authority, to the amount of over $300 billion U.S. dollars, which is, a monumental figure. Right? So, it really raised the alarm clock that the the U.S. is trying to use the U.S. dollar as a weapon, to weaponize it against, any adversary that it has. All right, so, countries has to come up with a backup option, and obviously. China being one of the biggest, I think it's the biggest trading nation in the world. So naturally, the RMB associated with the Chinese exports, and also historically a humongous amount of U.S. dollars associated with the Chinese trades, comes into play. So I think China now is signing contracts with many of the trading counterparts, trying to establish trade settlements using Chinese RMB. For example, the trade agreement that we had this morning with Brazil, right? So it's basically importing quite a bit of raw materials from Brazil, and therefore exporting Chinese yuan to Brazil, and that's why it's a very significant step for RMB internationalization.
And what would happen to the U.S. if more and more countries trade in their own currencies? And what does it mean for the U.S. economy as it has enjoyed exorbitant privileges due to the dollar dominance?
Yeah, I think, for now, it is still very difficult to sort of, overthrow the U.S. dollar reserve system. So the U.S. dollar is still taking 60% of the reserve. But I think over time, as more and more people use RMB, and I think RMB will become one of the trading major trading currencies in the world, to displace many of the other competitors, become probably one of the most important reserve currencies in the world.
Well, thank you very much for your analysis. That was Hong Hao, Chief Economist at Grow Investment Group. The Chinese leading tech company Huawei reported marginally yearly revenue increase in 2022 as U.S. sanctions continue to bite the company. And CGTN's Xu Hua has more.
In 2022, Huawei reported revenue of 642.3 billion yuan, around $93.5 billion US dollars. a 0.9 year-on-year increase. It's a marginal rise, but still deemed a major turning point after the company reported its first annual decline in revenue since 2022 last year.
For Huawei, 2022 was a year of normal operation from a wartime state in response to continuous sanctions from the United States. In short, the business is still under great pressure. In general, business performance is in line with expectations and the financial position remains stable.
Huawei was put on a U.S. blacklist in 2019. American firms were restricted from exporting key components and software to the company. To counter the U.S. sanctions, Huawei is investing heavily on technology development. The company spent 161.5 billion yuan on research and development in 2022, accounting for 1/4 of its annual revenue. Huawei is among a number of Chinese companies that have been the target of mounting U.S. sanctions in recent years. So what has Huawei done right to make its way out? And what can other Chinese tech companies learn about global cooperation and competition?
And I think Huawei's fight for, in a tough environment, reinventing itself, really going after what is demanded out there in the world, not just in China, but everywhere, and trying to find solutions to solve basic societal problems is also the ultimate real main motivation for success. Other companies should also be thinking in the long term because frankly, in today's information and innovation-driven society, you need that kind of commitment.
Experts say global competition is all about innovation, and the successful company will ultimately be those who produce groundbreaking innovation. Xu Hua, CGTN, Shenzhen, Guangdong Province.
And that will do it for this edition of Global Business here on CGTN. Thank you for being with us. The Point with Liu Xing is coming up next. Stay tuned.